Good evening, my name is George, and tonight we embark on a journey. Not across miles, but across time. We'll be looking back at this specific day, November 4th, through the long lens of history to see how events, both great and terrible, have shaped the world we live in today. From the clamor of ancient battlefields to the quiet hum of a scientific laboratory, from the fall of mighty empires to the rise of new leaders, this day has been a witness to it all. It's a day marked by profound discoveries, pivotal political decisions, tragic conflicts, and cultural milestones that continue to resonate through the generations. We'll be counting down through the centuries, revisiting some of the most significant moments that have unfolded on this date. Think of it as a nightly news report, but one that spans hundreds of years. We will explore the human drama behind the headlines, the triumphs of innovation, and the somber lessons learned from conflict. Our aim is to connect the dots, to understand how the sack of a city in the 16th century can, in its own way, relate to a presidential election in the 21st. It's a tapestry woven with threads of courage, ambition, tragedy, and hope. So, settle in as we begin our countdown. We'll move swiftly but thoughtfully through these epic moments. Each chapter of our story tonight represents a distinct point on our timeline, a snapshot of a world in flux. From the cries of revolution to the quiet awe of discovery, these are the events that define this day in history. And that's the way it is, as we begin our look back at November 4th. Our journey begins in the year 1576, in the bustling port city of Antwerp, then one of the wealthiest and most important commercial centers in all of Europe. The Low Countries were in the midst of the 80 Years' War, a protracted struggle for independence from Spanish rule. Tensions were extraordinarily high. Unpaid and mutinous Spanish troops, who had been fighting for King Philip II, saw Antwerp not as a city to be pacified, but as a prize to be taken, a treasure chest to be plundered for their long overdue wages. What unfolded on November 4th was not a battle in the traditional sense, but a brutal and merciless massacre that would come to be known as the Spanish Fury. Over 3 horrifying days, the soldiers rampaged through the city's streets. They set fire to more than 1,000 buildings, turning the architectural jewel of the Netherlands into a smoldering ruin. The sounds of screams and chaos echoed through the once prosperous avenues as the soldiers went from house to house, looting, destroying, and killing without restraint or mercy. The human cost was staggering. Historical estimates suggest that somewhere between 7,000 and 18,000 citizens were slaughtered in the onslaught. The economic heart of Northern Europe was ripped out. The sack of Antwerp had a profound and lasting impact on the Dutch revolt. It galvanized the disparate provinces, both Catholic and Protestant, uniting them in their opposition to the Spanish crown. The horror of the event led directly to the pacification of Ghent, an alliance that demanded the expulsion of all Spanish troops. This single brutal event effectively ended Antwerp's golden age. Many of its leading merchants, bankers, and skilled artisans fled north, particularly to Amsterdam, shifting the economic power within the region for centuries to come. The Spanish Fury stands as a grim reminder of the horrific consequences of war when discipline breaks down and greed takes over, leaving an indelible scar on the history of the Netherlands and a turning point in their long fight for freedom. And that's the way it was on November 4th, 1576. We now move forward in time to the year 1791, to the rugged frontier of the Northwest Territory, in what is now the state of Ohio. The young United States was struggling to assert its authority over these lands, which were fiercely defended by a confederation of Native American tribes. Tensions had been escalating for years, fueled by broken treaties and the relentless westward expansion of American settlers. President George Washington, determined to secure the territory, dispatched a force under the command of Major General Arthur St. Clair. St. Clair's army was a poorly trained, ill-equipped, and undisciplined collection of regulars and militia, many of whom were unfit for the rigors of a frontier campaign. On the morning of November 4th, as they were encamped along the banks of the Wabash River, they were caught completely by surprise. A powerful force of warriors from the Western Confederacy, led by the Miami Chief Little Turtle and the Shawnee Chief Blue Jacket, launched a devastating, coordinated attack on the American camp just before dawn. The assault was swift and overwhelming. The American militia, positioned on the perimeter, broke and fled almost immediately, crashing back into the main camp and spreading panic and chaos among the regular troops. The Native American warriors, using the cover of the forest with expert skill, surrounded the Americans and poured a withering fire into their disorganized ranks. St. Clair's men fought bravely in pockets, but their formations collapsed, and the battle devolved into a desperate one-sided slaughter. After 3 hours of brutal combat, what was left of the American army broke and fled in a panicked retreat, abandoning their cannons, supplies, and wounded. The result was an unmitigated disaster for the United States Army. Out of roughly 1,000 men under St. Clair's command, more than 600 were killed and nearly 300 wounded, a casualty rate of over 97%. It remains, to this day, the most severe defeat ever inflicted upon the United States Army by Native American forces. The battle had profound consequences, leading to a congressional investigation and a complete reorganization of the American military. And that's the way it was on November 4th, 1791. We shift our focus now from the battlefield to the operating theatre in the year 1847 in Edinburgh, Scotland. At this time, surgery was a brutal, terrifying ordeal. Patients were held down, fully conscious, as surgeons worked with frantic speed. The search for a reliable and safe anesthetic was one of the most urgent quests in medicine. Ether had been demonstrated a year earlier, but it had its drawbacks. It was flammable and often induced vomiting. A Scottish obstetrician named Sir James Young Simpson was determined to find a better alternative. Simpson and his two assistants, George Keith and James Matthews Duncan, had taken to experimenting with various chemical compounds, often in a rather unorthodox manner. In the evenings, after their work was done, they would gather in Simpson's dining room to inhale different substances, hoping to stumble upon one with anesthetic properties. On the evening of November 4th, they decided to sample a heavy, colourless liquid with a sweet smell that had been previously dismissed as too difficult to work with, chloroform. As the story goes, they each inhaled the vapour from a tumbler. The effect was almost immediate and far more potent than anything they had tried before. A feeling of cheerfulness and giddiness quickly gave way to unconsciousness. The next thing they knew, they were waking up on the floor the following morning, the chloroform tumbler lying empty. Simpson, realizing the significance of their accidental discovery, is said to have immediately proclaimed, "This is far stronger and better than ether." He wasted no time. Just days later, Simpson began using chloroform to relieve the pain of childbirth, a practice that was initially met with resistance from religious and medical traditionalists who believed suffering during labor was divinely ordained. However, its effectiveness was undeniable. When Queen Victoria herself used chloroform during the birth of Prince Leopold in 1853, its acceptance was secure. This discovery on a November evening revolutionized surgery and obstetrics, ushering in an era where complex, life-saving procedures could be performed without the agony that had defined them for centuries. And that's the way it was on November 4th, 1847. So, we return to the battlefield, this time right in the midst of the American Civil War in the year 1862. The Union cause was, honestly, languishing. The Army of the Potomac, which was the North's primary fighting force in the Eastern Theater, was led by the charismatic but maddeningly cautious Major General George B. McClellan. Now, McClellan was a brilliant organizer and, well, beloved by his men, but he was plagued by this chronic inability to actually commit his vast army to a decisive battle. He just kept overestimating the strength of his Confederate adversaries, led by General Robert E. Lee. President Abraham Lincoln had grown, increasingly exasperated with his top general. After the bloody Battle of Antietam in September, where McClellan had failed to pursue and destroy Lee's battered army, Lincoln's patience had finally run out. For weeks, he had urged, prodded, and pleaded with McClellan to advance, to really take the fight to the enemy. But McClellan, however, just remained in camp, always citing the need for supplies and rest, a condition Lincoln famously dubbed the slows. On November 4th, Lincoln, having concluded that the nation simply could not afford any more of McClellan's delays, made a fateful decision. He drafted the orders to remove General McClellan from command of the Army of the Potomac. The man chosen to replace him was Major General Ambrose Burnside, a corps commander known for his, distinctive facial hair, the origin of the term sideburns, and a reputation for aggressive, if not always successful, leadership. The order was dispatched from Washington and reached Burnside's camp near Warrenton, Virginia, on November 7th. The news was a shock to the army. McClellan was immensely popular, and his dismissal was met with dismay and even threats of mutiny among the troops, though he himself accepted the decision with grace. This change in command would prove to be pivotal. Burnside, feeling pressured to act decisively where McClellan had not, would soon lead the army to a catastrophic defeat at the Battle of Fredericksburg, one of the darkest moments for the Union in the entire war. And that's the way it was, on November 4th, 1862. Let us now fast forward to the tumultuous final days of the First World War in the year 1918. The war to end all wars had raged for over 4 years, leaving a trail of unprecedented destruction and, honestly, reshaping the political map of Europe. The Central Powers were collapsing under the relentless pressure of the Allied blockade and military offensives. On November 3rd, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, a sprawling, multi-ethnic state that had dominated Central Europe for centuries, had signed an armistice, effectively surrendering. On November 4th, that armistice went into effect. The House of Habsburg, one of Europe's most ancient and powerful dynasties, saw its empire dissolve. The dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary fractured along ethnic lines, giving birth to new independent nations like Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia, and leading to the expansion of others like Poland and Romania. The eagle on the imperial banner had fallen, and with it, an entire old world order that had seemed, permanent and unshakable just a few years prior. Simultaneously, the German Empire, the primary force of the Central Powers, was disintegrating from within. The German High Command knew the war was lost, but as they sought an armistice, the country was swept by a wave of revolution. On November 4th, the Kiel Mutiny, which had begun days earlier among sailors of the German High Seas Fleet, spread like wildfire. Sailors, soldiers, and workers took control of the city of Kiel and other major ports, forming councils and demanding an end to the war and the abdication of Kaiser Wilhelm II. This internal collapse was as decisive as any battle on the Western Front. The revolutionary spirit spread from the coast to the heart of Germany, undermining the authority of the imperial government. Within days, the Kaiser would be forced to abdicate and flee to the Netherlands, and a republic would be declared in Berlin. On this day, the world witnessed the death throes of two mighty empires, the end of monarchical rule for millions, and the chaotic, uncertain birth of a new Europe, setting the stage for the political landscape of the 20th century. And that's the way it was, on November 4th, 1918. We now travel to the sun-scorched sands of Egypt's Valley of the Kings in the year 1922. For years, British archaeologist Howard Carter, funded by the wealthy Lord Carnarvon, had been meticulously searching for the tomb of a little-known pharaoh from the 18th dynasty, Tutankhamun. Most of Carter's colleagues believed the valley had been completely exhausted, that all its royal tombs had already been found, and, for the most part, plundered in antiquity. Lord Carnarvon himself was growing weary of the expense and was really on the verge of withdrawing his funding. Carter was given one final season to make a discovery. His team focused on an area near the tomb of Rameses VI, a spot covered by the debris of ancient workers' huts. For years,
They had dug all around this small patch of land, but never directly on it. With time running out, Carter ordered the huts and the underlying debris to be cleared. It was a last, desperate gamble, a final attempt to uncover something, anything, that had been missed. On the morning of November 4th, the gamble paid off. A young water boy on the expedition, Hussein Abdel Rasool, stumbled upon a stone step cut into the bedrock. Excitedly, he called for Carter. The excavation team worked feverishly, clearing away the sand and rubble. By the end of the day, they had uncovered not just one step, but a flight of steps descending into the earth. It was the entrance to a sealed tomb, one that appeared to have been missed by centuries of tomb robbers. Carter knew he was on the brink of a monumental discovery. He sent an urgent telegram to Lord Carnarvon in England, which read, "At last have made wonderful discovery in valley. A magnificent tomb with seals intact. Recovered same for your arrival. Congratulations." He then had the stairway refilled and protected until his patron could arrive. This day marked not the opening of the tomb itself, but the discovery of its entrance. The moment that promised to unlock the secrets of the Boy King and provide the world with its most spectacular archaeological find ever. And that's the way it was, on November 4th, 1922.
In the immediate aftermath of the Second World War, with the memory of its unprecedented devastation still fresh, the world's leaders were determined to build institutions that could prevent such a catastrophe from ever happening again. They recognized that wars did not begin on the battlefield, but in the minds of men, fueled by ignorance, prejudice, and mistrust. The newly formed United Nations was the cornerstone of this effort, but a specialized agency was needed to address the cultural and intellectual roots of conflict. On November 4th, 1946, this vision took a concrete form. Following a conference in London, attended by representatives from 37 countries, the Constitution for the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO, came into force. Its founding mission was ambitious and noble: to contribute to peace and security by promoting collaboration among the nations through education, science and culture in order to further universal respect for justice, for the rule of law and for the human rights and fundamental freedoms. The organization was tasked with a wide range of responsibilities. It would work to improve literacy rates around the globe, protect historical and cultural sites of outstanding universal value, what we now know as World Heritage Sites, and foster scientific cooperation across borders. It aimed to be a global forum for the exchange of ideas, a bulwark against the kind of nationalist propaganda and intolerance that had helped precipitate 2 world wars. From its headquarters in Paris, UNESCO embarked on a mission that continues to this day. Its work has included everything from rebuilding schools in war-torn countries to safeguarding intangible cultural heritage like traditional music and crafts, to leading international scientific projects on climate change and oceanography. The founding of UNESCO on this day represented a profound belief in the power of human intellect and creativity to build lasting peace, a hopeful and idealistic response to a world shattered by war. And that's the way it was on November 4th, 1946. We now move to a moment that dramatically escalated the Cold War and forever changed the nature of human conflict. On November 1st, 1952, on the remote Eniwetok Atoll in the Marshall Islands, the United States conducted a test code named Ivy Mike. The results of this test, however, were analyzed and publicly announced on November 4th. This was not just another atomic bomb, it was something entirely new, something orders of magnitude more powerful, the world's first successful detonation of a hydrogen bomb. Unlike atomic bombs, which rely on nuclear fission, the splitting of heavy atoms like uranium or plutonium, a hydrogen bomb, or thermonuclear weapon, uses nuclear fusion. It harnesses the same process that powers the sun, fusing together light atoms like hydrogen isotopes under immense heat and pressure, which is itself triggered by a fission explosion. The device, which was not a deliverable bomb, but a massive multi-story cryogenic apparatus, was a scientific marvel and a terrifying weapon. The explosion was staggering, far exceeding the scientists' own calculations. It yielded a force of 10.4 megatons, roughly 700 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The fireball expanded to over 3 miles in diameter, and the mushroom cloud rose 25 miles into the stratosphere. The island of Elujalab, where the device was detonated, was completely vaporized, leaving behind an underwater crater more than a mile wide and 160 feet deep. The successful test of Ivy Mike ushered in the thermonuclear age. It rendered the existing atomic arsenals of both the United States and the Soviet Union, which would test its own H-bomb less than a year later, almost obsolete. The concept of mutually assured destruction became chillingly real. The power to destroy entire cities with a single weapon was no longer theoretical. The announcement on this day confirmed that humanity had crossed a terrifying new threshold in its capacity for self-annihilation. And that's the way it was on November 4th, 1952. In the autumn of 1956, a wave of hope and defiance swept across Hungary. A nationwide, spontaneous revolt had erupted against the country's hardline communist government and its domination by the Soviet Union. For a brief, exhilarating period, it seemed that the revolution might succeed. A reformist government under Imre Nagy was installed, promising free elections, the withdrawal from the Warsaw Pact, and a neutral status for Hungary. The people of Budapest celebrated in the streets, tearing down symbols of Soviet oppression, but this Hungarian spring was to be tragically short-lived. The Kremlin, under Nikita Khrushchev, could not tolerate the prospect of a satellite state breaking free from its orbit. While publicly negotiating a withdrawal, the Soviets were secretly massing their forces. In the pre-dawn hours of November 4th, a massive Soviet military operation, codenamed Operation Whirlwind, was launched. Thousands of tanks and tens of thousands of troops stormed into Budapest and other Hungarian cities. The resistance was fierce, but ultimately futile. Hungarian soldiers and civilian freedom fighters, armed with little more than rifles and homemade Molotov cocktails, fought bravely against the overwhelming might of the Red Army. The streets of Budapest became a war zone. The sounds of artillery and heavy machine gun fire echoed through the city as Soviet tanks crushed barricades and shelled buildings where resistance fighters were holding out. The battle for Budapest raged for days, but the outcome was never in doubt. By November 10th, the revolution was brutally crushed. An estimated 2,500 Hungarians were killed in the fighting, and another 200,000 fled the country as refugees. Imre Nagy and other leaders of the revolution were arrested and later executed. The Soviet invasion of Hungary sent a clear and brutal message to the world, and to the rest of the Eastern Bloc defiance of Moscow would not be tolerated. The Iron Curtain had come down again, with chilling finality. And that's the way it was on November 4th, 1956. Our timeline now brings us to Tehran, Iran, in the year 1979. The political climate was, well, electric. Earlier that year, the United States-backed Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, had been overthrown in the Iranian Revolution, and the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini had returned from exile to establish an Islamic republic. Anti-American sentiment was rampant, fueled by decades of United States support for the Shah's often brutal regime. The situation reached a boiling point when President Jimmy Carter allowed the exiled, terminally ill Shah to enter the United States for medical treatment. On November 4th, this simmering anger exploded. A group of several hundred Iranian students, followers of the Ayatollah, stormed the walls of the United States Embassy in Tehran. They overwhelmed the small contingent of Marine Guards, seized the compound, and took its diplomatic staff hostage. While a few were released early on, 52 American diplomats and citizens were held captive. The students demanded the return of the Shah to Iran to stand trial, along with the return of his vast wealth to the Iranian people. the seizure of the embassy plunged the Carter administration into a crisis that would dominate the remainder of his presidency. It was a nightly spectacle on American television, a symbol of American vulnerability and a source of national frustration and humiliation. The America held hostage segments became a staple of the evening news, with the number of days in captivity ticking up relentlessly. The crisis paralyzed United States foreign policy and became a central issue in domestic politics. Diplomatic negotiations proved fruitless. A daring military rescue mission, Operation Eagle Claw, ended in a tragic and embarrassing failure in the Iranian desert in April 1980. The hostages would ultimately endure 444 days in captivity, facing mock executions and harsh conditions. Their ordeal would only end on January 20th, 1981, just moments after Ronald Reagan was sworn in as the new United States president. The crisis on this day fundamentally altered United States-Iran relations, a legacy of mistrust that honestly still persists to this day. And that's the way it was on November 4th, 1979. We now arrive at a landmark moment in American political history, the presidential election of 2008. The nation was facing immense challenges, mired in two wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and reeling from the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. The campaign had been long and hard-fought, pitting the Republican candidate, Arizona Senator John McCain, a decorated war hero, against the Democratic candidate, a charismatic first-term senator from Illinois named Barack Obama. Obama's campaign had been built on a message of hope and change, galvanizing a broad coalition of voters, particularly young people and minorities, with his powerful oratory and a promise to transcend the bitter partisan divides of Washington. His candidacy was historic from the outset, as he was the first African American to be the presidential nominee of a major political party in the United States. The question on everyone's mind was whether the country was ready to cross that racial barrier. On Election Day, November 4th, the American people answered with a resounding yes. As the polls closed and the results came in, it became clear that Barack Obama had won a decisive victory. The images from that night are honestly unforgettable. The massive, jubilant crowd gathered in Chicago's Grant Park, a sea of faces, black, white, Latino, Asian, all celebrating together, many with tears streaming down their faces as their candidate took the stage to deliver his victory speech. If there is anyone out there who still doubts that America is a place where all things are possible, Obama declared, tonight is your answer. His election was a moment of profound symbolic significance, not just for the United States, but for the entire world. It represented the fulfillment of a dream for many who had fought in the civil rights movement, a milestone in the nation's long and often painful journey on race. On this day, a barrier that had stood for over 2 centuries was broken, and a new chapter in American history began. And that's the way it was on November 4th, 2008. For our final stop, we turn to the world of culture and technology in the year 2000. The turn of the millennium was a time of rapid technological advancement, and nowhere was this more apparent than in the fiercely competitive video game industry. Sony, having already achieved massive success with its original PlayStation, was set to release its highly anticipated successor. The PlayStation 2 had already launched to great fanfare in Japan and North America, and now it was Europe's turn. On November 4th, 2000, the PlayStation 2 officially launched across Europe. The anticipation was immense. Gamers lined up for hours, sometimes overnight, outside electronics stores, eager to get their hands on the sleek, black console. It was more than just a gaming machine. It was marketed as a complete home entertainment system. A key selling point was its ability to play DVD movies right out of the box, a feature that helped accelerate the adoption of the DVD format over VHS. The launch was a massive logistical undertaking and, honestly, a cultural phenomenon. The console's powerful Emotion Engine processor promised a new level of graphical realism and gameplay possibilities.
Launch titles like Ridge Racer V and Tekken Tag Tournament showcased its capabilities, but it was the promise of future games like Metal Gear Solid 2 and Grand Theft Auto 3 that truly fueled the hype. The PS2 was positioned not just as a toy, but as a sophisticated piece of technology for a maturing generation of gamers. The PlayStation 2 would go on to become the best-selling video game console of all time, selling over 155 million units worldwide. Its vast library of games appealed to a wide demographic, and its longevity was honestly unprecedented. It helped solidify video gaming as a mainstream form of entertainment, on par with movies and music. The European launch on this day was a crucial step in its global domination, marking the arrival of a device that would define a generation of gaming and entertainment. And that's the way it was on November 4th, 2000.
And so, our journey through this day in history comes to a close. We've traversed centuries, from the brutal sack of a great European city to the election of the first African-American president, from a discovery in a Scottish dining room that would end the agony of surgery to a test in the Pacific that threatened the world with a new kind of agony. We've seen empires fall and new organizations rise from their ashes. We've witnessed moments of profound tragedy and moments of incredible hope. Each event, a thread in the complex fabric of our shared past. History is not just a collection of dates and facts. It is a living story, and each of these moments had a powerful human dimension. The terror of a citizen in Antwerp, the elation of an archaeologist in Egypt, the quiet determination of a president, the defiant hope of a freedom fighter in Budapest. These events continue to shape our world, our politics, our culture, and even our own lives in ways we may not always recognize. The echoes of November 4th are all around us, if we only take a moment to listen. Now, I'd like to hear from you. Which of these events surprised you the most? Which one do you believe had the most significant and lasting impact on the course of history? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. It's through this kind of discussion that history truly comes alive. If you found this journey through time as fascinating as I did, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the events that made us who we are.